Can you hear me now? Let's go. Okay. And can you hear music at all? I did. Evidently, since the last time I used Streamlabs, it decided to delete all of my settings. So, yeah, that's fun. So, what's going on, everyone? This is weird. I haven't streamed in like couple years. So, this is kind of odd, but we're here. So, unlike the past where I've been streaming things like video games and stuff like that, I was actually talking to Matt, and we thought it would be cool if I did a little painting stream. So, today we are going to be painting this really cool little miniature here, but the problem is my camera is kind of terrible, so I'm just gonna have to deal with it for now. But we got here an elf sorcerer for one of my friends that I'm playing a live campaign with, and so we're just gonna hang out and paint this dude. So he's already been primed. He's got some really cool stuff going on, like this little flame here, which I think is gonna be awesome. Why is this repeating instead of playing? There we go. Cool. So, without further ado, let's get started. I've got my wet palette here. What's up, Calico? And all my paints, and every so often you'll see me bend down and look down here. That's because I've got all the paints that I thought I would need for this miniature, and decided that I'm too ADD when it comes to colors, so I've got my entire like paint rack down on the floor next to me. So if you see me looking down and pull something up, that's what's happening. Cool. So first things first, first thing I like to do whenever I am starting on a miniature is just trying to figure out what kind of colors I want. And so for this guy, I wanted him to be a little bit unique because I tend to stick with a more muted palette, meaning browns and grays, stuff that's really looks good in the context of a fantasy, but it can kind of get boring, especially when all my miniatures look the same. So with this one, we're actually going to use, for his cloak, we're going to use like a really nice, like marine teal color. And he is a drow, so we're going to be using like almost a blue-gray skin tone with white hair. So first thing that I'm going to want to do is get my base coat down. In this case, we're going to be using a darker called Deep Ocean. And what I prefer to do whenever I'm first starting is I will base coat the entire miniature with the darkest color that I want. So for instance, I want all of these nice little recesses on his cape here to be this deep, this really deep, like bluish green color. And so I'm gonna grab my brush here, and we're just gonna start putting paint on a miniature. So I don't really care all that much about the quality of the first coat. Really what I want to do is just get the entire miniature covered in some sort of color. First pass generally always looks just god awful, looks inconsistent and patchy, but that's part of the process. Because what I like to do is I prefer to have multiple thin coats built up. I find that gives me a much more consistent color. It gives me a much more consistent look and feel. What's going on, Jay? And it allows the details of the miniature to pop, right? So one of the big problems that you get if you use thick paint instead of thin down paint like this is you end up losing details. The paint settles into the cracks and crevices, and you end up losing detail. It ends up looking globby. You see a lot of paint strokes, and it just tends to not look great. So I'm going to make sure that I use multiple thin coats instead of one like really thick coat. Starting with my darkest color here. Yeah, they are. But again, painting miniatures isn't necessarily getting them photorealistic, right? I want this miniature to look cool when it's on the table primarily. If it looks photorealistic, awesome, right? But if, for instance, if I paint his face gray and against the backdrop of all the other colors I'm going to be using, it might clash. It's not, I want the color of his skin and the skin tone to also complement the other colors that I'm using, but I want it still to be close, right? And so in this case, the color I'm going to be using for his skin is this right here. It's called Snow Shadow. So it's still a pretty deep gray, but it has a light blue tint to it as well. So again, everyone is different. That's just the way I want to. So, okay. Just an FYI, I'm going to be struggling tonight because I have no idea how to stream while I paint. So if it goes off frame, I apologize about that. So I'm just going to try to get underneath this coat here. Yeah, exactly. Well, first time doing this kind of streaming for sure. Has this really cool kind of like halberd going on along with the cloak. I'm still debating. I painted it blue. I might change it later on. I think it looks good. It complements it, having it all the same color, but it might look cool if it was more of a contrasting color or some sort of something like that. I don't know. What do y'all think? Hey, Matt. What's going on, man? Thank you all for the follow. Absolutely unnecessary, but I appreciate it. Mostly because I have no idea if I'm going to keep doing this or not, because normally on Thursday nights I'm playing D&D with some of my family and a couple friends from college. Yeah, I like the blue too, Liam. It's really nice. And then, of course, once I start building up all of my highlights, it's going to look a little bit better. Wipe off my brush here and get my small brush. So for his pants, I think I'm just gonna go a neutral brown, nothing too fancy, because again, I want to draw the eye of whoever's seeing this towards the face, towards the upper part of the torso, because that's where most of the work is going to go into, as far as what I want people to look at when it's on the table. Yeah, I might do that too, because I realize that as I'm doing this, I'm moving it closer and closer to me, because like I normally paint like this when I'm like next to someone, but so having that camera, I think that's a good idea, is having some sort of like boundary set up on my desk here. I would love it if I could stream in my other room, but my other room is just super messy. And it's a lot easier to move my paint setup in here than my computer in there. Now, one thing you might notice is I'm not really paying attention to whether or not I'm quote unquote coloring in the lines. So you might see some colors bleed from one part that I don't necessarily want it. So I might get browns on the cloak or something like that. Again, for me, I don't really care about that at this stage. I just want to get as much paint on the miniature. I want to block out all my colors. So basically I want to put all the colors where I want them, and then worry about those little details later, because I can always go back and put more paint over something, but it's a lot harder once you get down the road to kind of make sure that I cover all the holes, if that makes sense. Versus just going ahead and getting good coverage now, especially because once I get to like second or third coat and this is looking much fuller and things like that. No, Cal, I actually get most of my paints from local shops. So I've got 2 local shops near me. I have a dedicated gaming shop called Game Theory, and then I've got a dedicated Games Workshop shop near me as well. That's pretty much where I get all of my paints. I do buy some on Amazon if the shops near me don't have that certain color. like my preferred paint is Reaper, and Reaper makes what they call paint triads. So you can buy these essentially 3 packs that come with a shade version of whatever tone you're getting, and the mid-tone, and then the highlight. So there's, you know, for instance, this color that I base coated the cape with is one of their shade colors, and then their mid-tone is what I'll paint over this, and then I'll use the highlight to really bring out some of the detail on the cape. So that's, but the store doesn't always have that, so I'll, you know, if I need to, I'll go and get something from Amazon. But I definitely prefer to buy all of my paints locally. You know, support my local game shops. But again, that's not always necessarily possible. Now, one thing I might want y'all's opinion on is this little flame here. I've got a couple different ideas for that, and I'm not sure which one I want to go with. So I've got this transparent orange here from Vallejo, so it looked more like fire, but I also have this cool contrast paint from Games Workshop that really matches the cloak. It's kind of a bluish green, but they're both transparent. So I'm trying to think if I want to go like more ethereal or arcane with the blue-green, or if I want to go with just fire and do like a clear orange. What do y'all think? Yeah, I thought so too, Lava, but I always like to get other people's opinion. All right, let's do his shirt next, which I think I'm gonna do like a light gray. So we'll take some dark gray, add a little bit of white, and start mixing. Oh yeah, the hold on. This boy. Yeah. One of my favorite miniatures, even though it's not so small. But yeah, so the oranges I used on that are very similar, or I think it's actually might be the same company that made this transparent orange. Yeah, I like him too. He's super creepy. Fits the people who made it for Halloween, and it just kind of fits that vibe. I love it. So right now I'm mixing up a little bit of dark gray with some white to get more of a neutral gray to kind of start painting his undercloak here. Actually, now that I look at this, it seems that those are his arms, his skin, and not actually a shirt. So, there it is, there it is. Just underneath his little cloak here. Bring it out here so you can actually see it because, you know, noob. Right now I'm using, so I've got 2 webcams. I'm using my like run-of-the-mill Logitech camera for my face cam. I'm using the Logitech Brio, which is a 4K webcam, but it's still a webcam, so the picture isn't gonna be great. I've thought about using my phone because I've got an iPhone, so it's a pretty decent camera. I might try using that in the future because I've got an app that'll allow me to use it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on his skin tone. So like I said, I'm going to be using this snow shadow color, which is really, really nice. Put it here so you can actually see it on my wet palette. Well, see it, it's kind of washed out, but. So very similar to what I'm doing with the cloak. His skin tone isn't going to be this color to end with. It's a little bit darker than what I want it to be. But this will allow me to come back and highlight up later. Yeah, I would love to get something like an SLR camera for this because that would be perfect. But I'm not going to spend that much money on something I started 40 minutes ago. Or 20 minutes ago, however long it's been. Now, I'm also thinking, looking at the way the fire is going to be over him, I would love to do a little bit of OSL. And for those of you who don't know what that means, OSL stands for Object Source Lighting. So if I pretend that this is a light source and I cast that light source onto the miniature, certain parts of the miniature are going to be in shadow, certain parts of them are going to be lit. I've done that effect before. It's kind of hard to do by hand. I prefer using an airbrush, which I don't have in my room, in my office. I have it in the other room. But it's always worth a shot because trying new things and messing up is how we learn, right? If we don't ever try new things, we'll never learn how to do them. Get a little bit on his hand here. Cool. All right, so I'm gonna switch back to my big brush here, and we'll go back and start applying the second coat of the shade to his cape here. You know what? Let me see something. Wonder if this will help at all. Yeah, that helped a little bit, but not much. That is very true. So we'll call it 5 minutes. How about that? Because OBS decided you haven't streamed in a while. It's okay for us to just destroy all of your settings, but only the one that you really, really need. Pretty much, yeah. You know what? Let me try something here. I've got this because I keep wanting to pull the miniature back towards me. I'm gonna try and adjust the camera zoom a little bit and move it towards me and see if that helps a little bit once that program comes up. Wrong way. There we go. That's better. Look at that. That's thinking right there. Which is not something I do often. So how has y'all's day been? I literally just got off of work. Figured I was gonna paint and share it with y'all. What you been up to, man? Ooh, fun. What are you writing on? Is it like a paper or is it like an essay or something like that? Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm just trying to make sure that because this is my second coat that I'm getting any of these spots that seem a little bit lighter than the rest, because again I want that nice even consistent coat so I don't have to go back and correct that later, even though I probably still will. Wipe that off. Now, in case... no, come back here. In case you're wondering, this flame I'm probably going to do absolutely last. Mostly because if I do it now and I make a mistake, it's a lot harder to correct that with clear paint that's been applied to it versus if it hasn't been applied to it. Going to add a little bit of dark gray to the base here just to make sure that I'm still working on all the miniatures versus just one or two bits and pieces here. Apologize if my big head gets in the way, but I'm gonna lean in here a little bit because I am half blind. What do y'all think about his staff here? I'm thinking I want it to be a little bit more natural looking. So maybe browns in silvers or gunmetal. Or do you think the whole thing should be like a metal rod with like gold accents? I don't know why I'm holding this when I have a perfectly good painting handle right here. So this is in every miniature I've ever painted, this is the part that's always frustrated me, are like the parts where the designer was like, this is gonna look really cool, but make it absolutely hard to get to. Like under legs, behind capes, and things like that. It almost makes me wish that this miniature was not pre-assembled. So some miniatures, like for instance Game Workshop miniatures, are come on sprues, and sprues are basically like if you ever did like model aircraft or cars or anything like that. It's like where the bits come in, like the molds trays, where you can peel them off and build them. I always find that those are a lot more conducive to painting because I can paint part of it and not have to worry about getting around stuff. So I'm going to put another coat of that dark gray on his little shirt here. I get all this white stuff all covered. By the way, y'all also came into the painting, part of painting that I would consider the absolute most boring part for me as a painter, and that is base coating. Base coating for me is always really mundane because all I'm doing is painting one or two colors. It looks flat, looks uninspired. The fun really begins when I start layering and starting to highlight and really make the miniature come alive at that point. But I should probably learn to like this part too. All right. So I'm going to switch to... Did I not get that color? No, I did not. Where's that? Ha, here we go. I'm going to go with a lighter brown to do all of the things like... oh, shoot. There's a lava. Your comment about the writing assignments had the word bondage in it because you were talking about Luther, and my security settings blocked it. Yeah. I mean, technically, I would prefer it if it blocked people talking about that in an inappropriate way, but still, that's kind of funny. But anyway, yeah, that sounds like a fun paper. I always enjoyed taking my church history classes. All right, so now we're going to switch to a little bit of a different shade of brown here, or it's almost like a tan. It's like a tanned leather color for the belt. I'm not going to worry about doing what I did with everything else, where I'm layering the dark so I can go light. I'm going to use what's called a wash over that. And a wash is basically pigment with a flow aid medium that allows it to flow into all the different cracks and crevices. And when used correctly, it really brings to life a lot of the details of the miniature that look mostly flat when you're actually doing it. I used to use a lot of that when I first started painting, just because I'm like, I don't really care about a ton of detail. I just want something that's tabletop ready. Once again, I'm gonna get behind this cloak in a really annoying way. I really wish y'all could see what was going on here, but it's super boring, so it's okay. All right, there we go. We're going back to this color because there's a bit back here that I missed. Yeah. Which Batman? Oh, you're talking about the one with like a the. I can only think of him as the bat or the vampire guy because, yeah. What's his name? Jordan something or other. Yeah, Tiny Ears Batman. Sparkly Batman. Oh man, I hope they put some sort of like, some sort of sparkly joke in there. They've got to, man. That'd be hilarious. Like Batman meets Superman. He's like, "Aren't you supposed to sparkle? Is that why you stick to the night, Batman?" Yeah. I'm apprehensive because I haven't really seen a movie from DC that I've liked in a long time. I love DC Comics, but their cartoons are pretty much on point. They're pretty much awesome. Every one that I've seen. Their full-length movie, like live-action movies, have just been so disappointing for me. Yeah, that's just me. But I'm always gonna give it a shot because it's DC and I love DC. I'm less of a fan of Batman, more of a fan of Superman. And they just did Superman so dirty with Man of Steel, in my opinion. So he's got these cool little, I don't know if y'all can see that very well, but he's got these like cool little like leather leather leggings or armor leggings here that are really nice. I think those will really pop if I get a nice coat of can't think right now because I'm painting. Nice coat of like quick shade or wash on it. Yeah. So I think as far as comics go, I'm looking at my pile of comic books sitting over there. I have to say that I like a lot more of the like indie comic book stuff. There was one, I can't remember who did it. It might have been yeah, I can't remember what the company's name was, but they made one called Never Never. Never Never is like this nightmarish take on the wow, I am blanking on everything here tonight. What is it called? Peter Pan. It's like a nightmarish take on Peter Pan, right? So the Never Never, Peter Pan is like this guy who kidnaps girls and sacrifices them in order to get like eternal life, and it's just this really interesting take. It's really different. Not for the faint of heart, and definitely not a family-friendly comic by any stretch of the imagination, but it was fun. So I'm going to switch to my mid-tone for the cape. So like I mentioned before, what I prefer to do is I prefer to paint my my base coat in the darkest color that I'm going to use. So now I'm going to go back and start really shading in, grab some water here, start shading in, not shading in, but building up my colors. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually not going to use the tip of my brush. I'm going to use the edge of my brush. I'm just going to hit all of these raised portions on the cape. And then I'll actually start working my way down these little slopes and raises and like raised edges and stuff, just so that that dark color that I base coated with ends up being the darkest, the absolute, get out of here, the absolute darkest parts of this cape. Yeah. Because really what I want that dark color to be is, if we're thinking about lighting and light sources, I want that dark color to be the shadow that light is casting on this cloak. And having that contrast between lighter and darker colors, even aside from just lighting, a lighting aspect, is it gives the cloak and the thing that you're painting depth, and it makes it look much more dynamic and cool. Like, it's a really simple process. Yeah. No, huffing paint is not a good idea, is it? But helps it be more dynamic, and helps it give this idea of lighting. Even though, for instance, if my light source was on top of this miniature coming down, I really wouldn't have areas like up here or down here on the edge dark, right? The darkness would really be in this crook here and underneath. I'm really not looking to make this like photorealistic as far as the lighting goes. I just want to make it look interesting. So I'm going to make sure that I leave all of these recesses dark, even if it would naturally be lit. This music is completely inappropriate for what I'm doing right now. It's way too upbeat. Still too upbeat. Yeah, that too. So like, but one of the things that I like to do with miniatures, for instance, I just finished get in frame. This Space Marine here, and one of the things that I like to do is I like to mess with lighting directions and things like that, to where certain parts of the miniature look like it's lit and some are in shadow. So even though lighting changes, it still makes the miniature look interesting and look dynamic to have some sort of lighting effect, even though the lighting would change, right? So like Liam pointed out, if this boy was casting a spell, it's gonna throw light everywhere, which is what I was talking about earlier with object source lighting, which I am not good enough to get really well. Make sure I keep this in frame. So what I'm doing now is I'm starting to build up these highlights on the edges. So if you can see this, you see how you have all these ridges. Well, some of those ridges are steeper than others. So on those steeper ridges, I really want to work this paint down all the way so that just the deepest part of the ridge has that darker color in it. And this is where the fun begins. because this is where the miniature starts to come alive and start to look really, really cool and dynamic. And it also is where I tend to mess stuff up. I would agree with you, Calico, that miniature paint fumes are the best, except that miniature paint don't have fumes because it's an acrylic paint. Although if it did, I would probably be getting high all the time because I am sitting at my painting table pretty much for 2 to 3 or more hours a day when I can. One of the things I'm also doing, and it's again one of these things that isn't really photorealistic or real to life, is called edge highlighting. Edge highlighting is really something that Games Workshop miniatures are known for. For instance, again referencing the Space Marine, you notice how all of these like lines and ridges and stuff are a brighter color. It helps some of the details pop, but it's not exactly photorealistic or realistic to how light would actually interact with the miniature. But again, one of the things we're doing, especially with something that is this small, right? So here's a D20 for reference for those of you who are D&D players. This is not a large miniature, so I want as many details on this bad boy to pop as much as possible. And edge highlighting helps that, again, even though it's not exactly photoreal. If I were entering this into maybe like a painting competition, maybe I would spend that much detail into it, but this is going to be used on the tabletop IRL for a friend of mine, so this is not really meant to be super fancy. It's just meant to be used and had fun with. This is really, doing stuff like this is where brush control comes in really handy. There we go. That looks pretty good. Oh. Let's make sure we get all of this edge here, not just part of it. There we go. I mean, it's better than drugs. Although this is pretty much a drug. But we don't talk about that. Alright, let's start getting some of these details on this little front cloak here. I say front cloak because I keep forgetting what it's called. I want to call it a halberd, but I'm pretty sure a halberd is a pole arm. This is going to be fun because there's a lot of really small wrinkles in this jacket on the front of it. There we go. That's much better. Not exactly where I want it, but we'll get it where we want it in just a moment. Wash my brush off here. And let's go in for our second coat of the belt and stuff. They're not action figures, they're miniatures. Come on. They're not dolls, they're action figures. They're not action figures, they're dolls. What? Get your nerd stuff straight. Now, I have this relaxing music on. I almost feel like I should be playing like the Doom playlist, knowing some of the folks who are on the stream. Like all of a sudden Rip and Tear comes off as I'm just gently painting a miniature. Alright, let's get these pants. Second coat going for these. And so now for these pants here, probably what I'll do is I'll end up mixing, doing a custom paint mix of this like earth brown that I've got going on with some of the this lighter brown. So I'm actually going to create my highlight shade instead of, you know, using a pre-made one, mostly because I don't like lighter browns. They tend to go more towards red than they do brown, which isn't great. I could always just add a little bit of the opposite color on the color wheel to bring that saturation down with the red saturation down, but it's just easier to add a lighter brown instead of going through all that trouble. Exactly. I'm not playing with toys, Mom. Warhammer's a sophisticated war game. It takes a lot of thought and strategy. You just don't get me. Oop, wrong color. And let's get some of the stuff underneath this cape here. Oh, thank you. Glad you can actually see it. Alright. Now I'm trying to figure out what color I want to make his boots and his gloves. Or, well, he's wearing one glove and then like one greave here. Because I've already used a lot of brown. How about we go with... about we go with a different shade of brown? Because that's all I can think of right now. I probably could have gone black, but for me, I don't like painting in pure black because pure black tends to be a little bit flat. And harder to bring shades out because if you really paint black in the same way you paint, say, like this cloak, where you do all the high spots are lighter than the dark spots, then it just starts looking gray instead of black, and you lose that look. So it's a lot harder to do like a black shoe or something like that than brown. I should say just a lot harder to make it look good, in my opinion. But I don't know if y'all can see this really well, but this is kind of what I mean. If you look at this this brown versus this brown, this one just looks red as it gets darker. And so this is what I find happens in a lot of brown shades, is that instead of getting just like a darker brown, you just end up getting closer and closer to maroon, which is kind of annoying. Still haven't decided what I want to do with the staff, whether I just want to make it all metal or if I just want to make it like a more natural looking thing, like with like a wooden rod with steel stuff and cloth on it, or if I want to make it look more majestic and do like a steel shaft with a golden crest, and then maybe all of these little rings here be brass or bronze or something like that. Don't know yet. We'll figure it out. Maybe. Brush is looking a little bit dry, so let's throw some water in there. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that I like to do thin coats, so or else things start looking blotchy. So I tend to use a lot of water in my paints, again, just so that I can get those consistent coats versus necessarily quick coats. I would much rather have something look good and take 2 or 3 hours, which I don't think this one will. It doesn't have that much detail. Much rather have it take 2 to 3 hours and look good than take 30 minutes and lose detail. So that is one glove. And then we want his little greave over here. Which is not really a greave if it's made of leather, is it? What would that be? Liam, you know a lot of like medieval terms and stuff. What would that be if it's leather? It wouldn't be a greave, would it? What would that be called? Let me try something here, because I'm still going off camera a little bit. Try to zoom out just a touch. Like if you have like a bracer, that's what I was thinking of. Thank you, Liam. Liam says, I'm sorry, what? And that, for whatever reason, jogs my memory. Let's zoom out just a hair. There we go. See all my messy stuff. You know it's being used when there's paint on everything. Alright, so I think we'll want to do a second coat on his skin tone. Now one of the things that you'll notice that I haven't started painting yet are any of the weapons, because he's got a little, what looks, is that a dagger? Yeah, like a little dagger right there, that you can see that little white spot right there. I haven't started painting that because normally I paint things that I would use metallic paints for. I paint all of those last. Because metallic paint is annoying to work around and to work with sometimes. So I prefer to leave that to last. That way I don't have to worry about painting over it, because the more, so metallics are this weird thing where if you make a mistake, it's a lot harder to cover than regular paint because of the mica powder that's in it. It's that stuff that actually makes it look metallic. And it's a lot harder to paint over because that mica powder will actually shine through the thin layers of the paint that we're using. And because of that, I will tend to paint with it last. That way, if I do make a mistake, I don't have to touch the metallics as often, because I would much rather have to do one pass on my metallics and make my mistakes than have to constantly go back and fix errors that I might, you know, mess up and do. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but that's where we're at. Well, I mean, the miniature's coming along. Got a little dark elf here. But that's about it. Yeah, pretty much that. Now, one thing I'm doing here is I'm adding a little bit of white to the skin tone that I have, because I'm going to start doing my highlight passes on his skin, which is the really, really fine details here. Now, one thing that I really don't enjoy about painting skin, it's not that I don't enjoy it, it's that it's just difficult. Skin is one of these things that you really don't have like hard stops on, right? So you'll notice if you look at light being cast on skin, is you typically don't have a hard start or a hard stop, and you have light. So for instance, I have a light source right here coming at my face. So if my skin was, say, metal, then I would have a hard shadow on this side of my face, but I don't have that. In fact, what I have is a lot of light bleed on places where you would expect to see shadows, like on the other side of my nose. Because skin, instead of blocking light, tends to absorb it and scatter it throughout other skin, because skin is transparent. And so it's a lot harder to paint, to make a solid like plastic and paint look well. Okay. I'm pretty sure you already did that with Omen. But if you want to send me an STL file to print and paint on stream, I will absolutely do that, regardless of what it is. I take that back. I'm gonna stop myself there. Not regardless of what it is, but I probably will paint it. Last thing I want is y'all sending something weird for me to paint on stream, like really weird. Too late. He said it. It's gonna happen. All right. Next thing you know, I'll get Merc Danjaw in the mail. All right, now comes the fun part. His face. Now, the reason I say fun part is, number one, that's a small face. Number two, it's got that hood around it, so it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to get my brush in there. I could use a smaller brush, but the problem you end up with small details and small brushes is the advantage of a large, okay, let me start over. Let's take a look at these two brushes side by side. Let me wipe off the paint so it doesn't dry on there. At these two brushes side by side. So the one on the right is the one I've been using this whole time. The one on the left, you can see, is significantly smaller, right? The problem with using a small brush on fine details like his face is that small brush will do a great job of moving around small details, but because it's so much smaller and it has less surface area on the bristles itself, you'll end up with less paint on the brush. And less paint also mean less paint and less water, less medium will also translate directly to less paint being transferred onto the miniature itself. So you end up having to do more passes, which means more chances of mistakes, and less fun for everyone. Just like whenever I actually paint eyes, I will use a larger brush instead of a smaller brush. Oh, I hope that's on stream. Cool. What I'll end up doing probably with the face is, with a miniature this small, I never bother doing eyes. It's just too much of a hassle. All right, so moving on to the absolute third pass on the cloak will be my highlight layer. So I've done my midtone. That was the second pass I did. The first layer was the darkest color here. Now we're gonna do the highlights. And the highlights, I really want to make sure that it's only on the peaks. So just like I want the darkest color to only really be in the deepest recesses, I want my lightest colors to really only be on the absolute tallest peaks. So on some of these, the tallest peaks are going to be really tall, and on some of them, they're going to be really small. You'll notice too that, again, I'm using the side of my brush instead of the tip of the brush. What that's doing is it's giving me more control to paint just that top bit. Although on some of these I will end up needing to use the tip of my brush just because the edge isn't standing out as much as the rest. When I'm using the tip, especially when I'm trying to get to these smaller areas and have a lot of control, I want to make sure that I have multiple points of contact on the miniature itself. So like you'll see I'm bracing my hand on the base here and then bracing my pinky here. That's just going to make sure that I'm not shaking all over the place because my hands do not always like to listen to what I want them to do. Does that sound weird? That sounded weird. I don't know. Just me, maybe. Again, we're just getting in these tallest edges just to make sure that we get that dynamic look I was talking about earlier. One of these days I'd love to try this style of painting, this kind of building up highlights, except I want to try it with different color. So like instead of shading with basically just a darker version of my highlight, you use a completely different color for my highlight and make it kind of look almost velvet. You know how like velvet, while it's still the same color, almost has this sheen to it where it looks like two different colors. I kind of want to see if I can't try for that effect one of these days. Make sure we get these edges here. Now sometimes I'm not going to on this guy here because he's more of a sorcerer, so he's not going to be up at the front lines like, you know, other characters like barbarians or fighters or something like that. But what I will do is, on some of those characters or on characters that look a little bit rougher, I'll actually add a little bit of dirt to the bottom of the cape. I'm not going to do that in this case because I think this character wouldn't really let himself get all that dirty. Alright, so that's the back of the cape. Now we want to do the hood. The hood's going to be a little bit different because there's really no recesses and things like we have on the cape. So what I'm going to do is I can see where I started and stopped my highlight here, or from the depth to midtone. So I'm just going to go up from there, making sure that I leave a little bit of both colors, and then just working my way around and getting those highlights in. What I'll do in just a second, I've been practicing on a technique called glazing, and glazing essentially is a technique where you use about 50% paint, 50% water, and it allows you to lay down a controlled amount of pigment so that you get smooth transitions from one color to the next. I'm not really great at it right now. I did learn a few new things. YouTube is your best friend if you're ever wanting to learn to paint. But I learned a few new techniques that will allow me to, that I've been trying lately, that I've been having good success with. But we'll edge highlight just around the face here, making sure we get that nice detail. Now we're going to come down to this cloak here, and with this, I'm just going to make you, like, you see how we have these two triangles here? I'm just going to highlight the inside of it because I'm going to act as if the light source is coming from up top. So the inside of those edges are going to be highlighted. The bottom aren't. Unless I screw something up royally and just do that to fix it. An alchemist had a stroke while trying to make a chimera. Yeah, exactly. And we might make a happy little accident, but it's okay. There's no such thing as an accident that can't be fixed. I always find it funny whenever I streamed back in my day, back when I used to stream video games, my phone always blew up the moment my stream started, and true to form, my phone is blowing up like crazy right now. It's hilarious. Wash my brush off here. With stuff like this, especially when I'm trying to get like these edges, I really want to stick with a brush that has a good point. I don't really want to use a worn out brush or something like that because a lot of this is really fine detail work. So I just want to make sure that my brush is in good condition. I tend to use brushes made from sable hair. So they're a little bit more expensive, but they last longer. They tend to hold more paint. They tend to last longer. And just all around be better. Kind of like the Patriots. I mean, it's not busted in the sense that it's broken, but it is definitely busted as in my friends are just now decide that they want to start texting. Like, haven't heard anything from these couple friends in like a month, and they decide now would be a great time to start texting back and forth. SJ, thanks for the follow and welcome. Alright, it's looking decent. Alright, so now I'm going to try and blend some of these. So I'm going to pull some of this paint away, different part of my palette, and start adding in water so I get a nice glaze going. Now for this, we really don't want a ton of liquid on our brush, So I'm also going to take this old nasty piece of paper towel. I'm just going to wick away some of that, just so I can control how much water I have here. And then I'm going to pull in towards the color that I want to blend to. Because if you notice, when I lift up my brush, it's leaving a bit of a pool of that color. And so I don't want that pool of color to be on the wrong part of the miniature and leave like a hard water line, which is always nasty. So SJ, how was your day? All right, going back to the brown so I can do one more pass over some of this leather just to make sure that I'm getting out all of what my grandfather used to call holidays, meaning parts of the miniature that did not get painted. Yeah, I saw that. I moved it. Again, I keep wanting to get really close so I can see all the details like I'm used to doing it by myself. I just got to get used to being on stream doing this. Now I'm going to take some of this dark gray that I had earlier, and I'm going to start painting in some of the parts that I'm going to be painting metallic. Well, I actually have a, I guess it's called a jeweler's, what would it be called? Like a jeweler's magnifier where it like goes over my head. But I usually only use that for the smallest of details, and I really didn't feel like having that on stream the whole time because it kind of makes my eyes hurt after a while. But we'll be fine. It's the first time I'm doing this, so I have that excuse. I'm not sure if y'all can see this, but I'm just coating the staff in this dark gray just to prep it for metallics. I find that metallics work best over black, especially if I'm doing something like steel, because steel, for whatever reason, especially if you're wanting to make it look old and worn, using a metallic silver or metallic metal over black just makes it look really, really cool. Makes it look old and worn because you have that kind of potted look or patinaed look. So I think I'm going to go with the metal rod idea, where it's going to, the entire rod is going to be silver. All these really cool rings are going to be brass, and then this little head is going to be gold. I think it'll give me a nice contrast to what the elf actually looks like. Almost look like he's using something that he wouldn't naturally use as a magic user, if that makes sense. So like this idea of, even though magic is in his nature because he's a sorcerer, that he is using an object that he wouldn't normally use, and so it doesn't really match his aesthetic. Kind of give it that idea. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transition from my nice sable hair brush to a synthetic brush. The reason I do that is metallics have this mica powder in it. It's what makes metallics metallic, right? And with that, that mica powder can actually damage the bristles and the hair of the brush, and so I don't really like using metallics with my really nice brushes, and so I use some cheaper synthetic brushes to do my metallics. So I have this nice metallic silver from Citadel. It's called Ironbreaker. I just got it the other day, but I'm really liking it. I used to use Army Painter's plate metal, but it was really thick. I couldn't really thin it down well. It really never gave me a good consistent coat. But this stuff from Games Workshop has been really nice. Sorry if this angle's weird for y'all, but I can't see it on the other direction. So one thing that I haven't really talked about at all, one of the things that I love doing when it comes to miniatures is kind of giving my miniatures a story, right? So while I'm painting, I like to kind of think about who is this person? You know, what was their life like? What are they doing? You know, how did they get into the situation where, you know, they're posed like this? You know, whether it's striking with a sword or are they sneaking, like what got them into that situation? Why do they have the equipment they have, or the gear that they have? Just like I was saying with this staff, why would a sorcerer be using a staff, right? Because a sorcerer's magic is innate. So why is he using a staff? What got him to use that? Was it something he found on adventure? Was it something that helps him channel his magic? Things like that. I like thinking about that while I'm painting them because it gives me an idea of giving this person personality. Omen didn't scar me for life necessarily. It was just like I've said to you before, I just found it difficult to paint because number one, it wasn't my miniature, but also like the colors that Omen really isn't my style. And so because it's not my style, I just struggled to paint her. It's not that her backstory, I think her backstory is, or at least what she is in the stream so far, has been really fun. All right, so where is my gold? Here's my golds. This is Liberator Gold, again by Games Workshop. It's more of a silvery gold, which I think would look really nice here. There we go. So what I'm planning on doing after I'm finished the metallics is going ahead and applying a wash to the entire, or to most of the miniature. I'm not going to apply a wash to the parts that I've already layered because the layering process kind of took over what a wash is supposed to do. I'm sure Omen becoming one of the seven and a servant of Strahd, her backstory must be fun and not dark or mortifying at all in any way, shape, or form. Sounds about right. All right. So the next color I'm going to use is, yep, is that? No, that's not it. A color called True Copper by Army Painter. Like I said earlier, I don't really like a lot of Army Painter's paints, and they're just kind of thick and gross most of the time, but I love this metallic color. It just looks super cool. It's got like a nice dark bronze color. So we're going to use this to do all these really cool little details here. You can kind of see what I'm talking about. I don't know if you can see that well or not, but it's kind of glooping up instead of really spreading evenly. I don't know what it is about Army Painter's metallic colors, but I've never really had much luck getting anything better. I don't know if it's just me or if their metallic paints are really just that bad in thinning it down. So I'm just adding some accents here, trying to get some of these more interesting details on the miniature done. So while that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and apply the wash. So this is a wash. This is Nuln Oil by Citadel or Games Workshop. So a wash is essentially a super thin down paint with a flow aid in it. So water, for those of you science nerds, you'll know this, that water tends to stick to itself. It's like if you put a drop of water on like metal, it'll bubble up and kind of stay together. What Flow Improver does is it thins it out even more so than it would with water, but it also creates it so that it sticks to other things versus itself. And not polarity, it's essentially because of surface tension that it does that. But what this will do is it'll allow it to actually flow instead of sticking to anything, including itself. And all of these recesses and stuff like on the belt, on these like little leather bits here, on her boots, his boots actually, and on the staff, it'll flow into all those crevices, and we're really going to see those parts of the miniature come to life in front of us. So we'll take that, get a little bit of that on there, and we're just going to spread it on like I don't care. And let y'all see it. So the only hard thing that I find about applying a wash, in the way that I apply it at least, is making sure that I just don't do too much, but that I also put enough so that it actually does flow into all those bits and places that I want it to. So you can kind of see now, even from this blurry webcam, you can see that all of those little details that you couldn't really see before on those pouches are there. You can actually see, hey, look, there's a little line there where the flap of the thing goes up. So that's exactly what a wash does, is it just highlights a lot of those really nice details and makes things look super cool. In fact, it makes it look so cool that a lot of people refer to a wash as liquid talent, because adding a wash instantly makes your miniatures look significantly better, because all of those cool details that would have been missing are now there. So you notice I'm applying this to a lot of the leather. The way that I normally use washes is I apply it to leather and metallics, because leather and metallics tend to be more flat after they're done being painted. And so adding a wash to them brings out those dynamics and brings out those really cool details. I am not at the level yet where I can do what's called non-metallic metal, which means I use just normal paints to make it look metallic. I am not that talented yet. I've tried it a few times with varying degrees of success, but it's very difficult to get right, because it requires you to use all of those techniques I was talking about earlier, like glazing and layering and understanding of how light interacts with things very well, which I don't have a really nice grasp of just yet. So that is that done. So next thing I'm going to do, rinse my brush off here. So what else do I need to do? I need to paint the hair. So I'm just going to steal some of this white paint that I used earlier. And we're just going to add it in there, making sure that we fix any bleed over from the coat. and making sure that instead of that gray that we had before, that it actually looks white. Now, I'm going to do something really quick that I wasn't planning on doing, but we'll see how it works. One of the things that I'm looking at is his face looks decent, but it doesn't look as dynamic as I'd like it to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use what's called a recess shade or a pin wash. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to take more of my wash here. I'm going to select a small synthetic brush, and I'm just going to take a tiny bit of that same wash we used. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it in his mouth and eye sockets. There's a microphone right there. So that's just going to give it a little bit more, bring a little bit more notice to his mouth and eyes, give it that sense of depth. Cool. And last but not least, we are going to paint the flame. And so for that, I'm going to use what's known as a contrast paint. Contrast paint is essentially if you take a wash and a paint and they meet somewhere in the middle, that's a contrast paint. It's a product by Games Workshop. It is very similar to a wash in that it will tend to seek out the deeper parts of the miniature or of the actual part that I'm painting here, while at the same time being transparent. This is actually the same stuff that I plan on using with Elbereth's miniature once I paint hers out, if I can get it to print out clear like I want it to. There we go. Cool. All right, so that's pretty much all we're going to do for the main body of the miniature. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a lighter gray and I'm going to paint over the base. So if you notice right at the start, I painted this base kind of a darker gray. I'm going to take a little bit of a lighter gray and paint over that, and then we're going to use that same wash to wash over the base, and that's going to give it kind of this rocky look. Normally I would use dry brushing to get that effect, but because of the way this miniature has been sculpted, I'm not exactly sure that would really work well. I would end up getting paint all over his legs and boots, and I really don't want that because I worked hard on it. So that looks good for now. And it doesn't really matter if that's messy or not, because the whole point of it is I want it to look like stone. So even though there are some patches in here that are still showing the darker stuff or some places I didn't get, that's perfectly fine. What I'm going to do now is, while I wait on that to dry, is you can see that this kind of has two bases. It has the round base and then it has that little molded base. So I'm going to go through and I'm actually going to paint this black base black again, just to make sure that we get rid of all those mistakes. Grab some water this down. We're just going to come in here and follow the lines of that molded base and just re-black this base. Just like that. That looks significantly better than it did before. So now all we gotta do is wait for that base to dry so that we can apply the wash. But while we wait, got a second miniature that we can start on, y'all. This one's a little bit different. So this is for another character, still a magic user. But this guy is a wizard versus this guy, which that's a sorcerer. Set this boy aside. You want a Fitz model? Hey, if you sculpt it, or if you find a sculpt that you want me to print out, I would be happy to print it out and paint it. This guy reminds me a lot of Doctor Strange. So I'm kind of, even though I tend to paint a lot of red cloaks, I really think this guy would look good with a red cloak. So yeah, let me grab red. All right, so we got fire red. Awesome. All right, so we got our triad here that I'm gonna use for red. I've got this Reaper Violet Red, Abominable Gore by Army Painter, and then Fire Red by Reaper. Though I love that color combination, it just works well for me. My wet palette is drying up a little bit, so I might go grab a water bottle real quick and refill that. So yeah, give me 1 sec, I'll be right back. I'm back. Just with a little bit of bottle of water. It's an old like airbrush cleaner bottle that I keep water in. And all I'm gonna do is peel this back. Just squirt a little bit more water on the sponge material. Let that soak up. I'm gonna do the same over here. All right, well, let's turn this wet palette around so that I have a fresh side. And we'll start with our red base coat for his cloak. So as far as his like cloak goes, I'm definitely gonna stick with red, but what do y'all think about the rest of the miniature? He looks kind of regal, in my opinion. I don't know if that's a better look at him there. Nope, it's not. But I don't know. He almost looks like he has like a leather Roman kind of style like skirt. Yeah, we'll have to see. But this miniature is also for another player in a campaign that we're doing. So I'm running Wild Beyond the Witchlight for a group of friends of mine on Saturday. Got a nice group of guys and one lady that I feel very, very sorry for. Her character is a gnome rogue. And at multiple times in the campaign, we've only been going for, I think, 2, maybe 3 sessions. And in multiple times in the campaign, she was the only character conscious or actually there. So one character left because he was like, I don't want people to kill people. And one of the other characters murdered a dude. And so he left the party. And she was literally left all alone. And then another situation, they were trying to get off a bridge and jump down and get into this like swamp area. And they failed their dexterity rolls. And I think I asked them to do athletic rolls or acrobatics rolls, what I asked them to do. and they all failed except for this one player. And so she ended up being the only one conscious, and a bunch of creatures came and robbed them while they were unconscious. And she basically sold them memories. Like, that's what they were stealing. They were stealing memories, and this kid or this girl let them take the other player's memories. One of those memories included a memory of his missing wife that he was looking for. I'm like, that is so cold. That is so cold. But this is one of the characters, newer characters. So the kid, one of the players had his character leave, and he made a new character who is a high elf wizard. So that is who we are painting now. So this guy's skin tone is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit more yellowish, almost like the high elves of Skyrim is what I'm thinking. Not necessarily exactly like that, but similar. All right. So that's the cloak. We'll borrow some of this brown to do this. I wish Dirk was on, because this is sticky right here. This wizard has sticky right now. Dude, what if I was actually painting Mark Danjaw though? That would be hilarious. Maybe I was painting the friend he got sticky from before the bovine accident. The unfortunate bovine incident. Indeed. Hashtag justice for Clarence. Although now that I say that out loud, I feel like there was actually something like that here recently, maybe? I don't know. I feel like that's a little too on the nose. To an extent. So I think his overcoat is just going to be black. I know I said earlier that I don't really like painting black because it tends to lean more towards gray once you start highlighting. But I'm just feeling like having like a black overcoat underneath or over armor just looks super classy. So I'm going to go with black here. And once again, I am holding a miniature with my fat hands instead of using this awesome miniature holder that I've got sitting right next to me. Hashtag fail. I'm trying to figure out where this little cloak starts and stops, because it doesn't look like it goes all the way up. It actually looks like the under armor that he has down here, like this Roman style skirt, is a set of leather armor that goes all the way up, and then this little cloak that I was wanting to paint black is just like a belted on cloak that's just covering the bottom half of his body. So that's how I'll paint it. That's what it looks like to me. That paint's a little too dry, so let's add some water. I feel like I'm getting a little bit better at holding this miniature where it needs to be, but I don't know, I still keep wanting to draw it closer. Now, like the other miniature, the base coat really isn't going to look good until I start building up those layers and building up a lot of those highlights and things like that. That's expected. I don't really, you know, nothing's really going to look really super good the first time. Oh no, don't. Why'd you have to bring up that? Oh my gosh, dude. Too soon. Forever is too soon for that poor doggo, man. Oh man. Can't remember what the dog's name though now that I think about it. I was like trying to remember his name. I'm like, I cannot remember that dog's name. That's sad. It's been a while since I watched Futurama though, specifically that episode. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I don't know. Was it smell like? See, now I've got to look it up. Oh my gosh, what was that dog's name? Google time. What was the dog's name in Futurama? Seymour. His name was Seymour. Yeah. How sad is what? Oh, I have no idea. I just thought it sounded familiar. Alright, so for his armor here, we'll use the same brown that I used on this other guy. We'll use kind of that reddish brown that I was talking about. Because he also has a lot of these like straps and things on him that I'm going to use that lighter brown on, that kind of like tanned leather brown. How bad is it when I'm looking down? Like, how bad is the glare off the top of my head? Because I feel like I'm just bald enough to where it might start making the camera wonder what the heck is going on. We've got to do right back there. One of the few things I dislike about, again, miniatures that are painted to look good versus being painted or versus being made to paint is that you get all of these really awesome details behind stuff that makes it really hard to get to. I'm missing a ton of references that y'all are making, and it's kind of sad because I've never actually saw that interview that you're talking about. All right, so I'm gonna try and make his hair. Try and make his hair a kind of a tan or a blondish color. So for that, I'm gonna use an off-white and mix it with that that brown I was talking about earlier, the kind of leather, like tan leather brown. We'll see what that gives us. I may need to add a little bit of yellow in there just to bring out that aspect of it. Surprised this isn't instantly catching on fire because I'm mixing a Games Workshop paint with a Reaper paint. Yeah, I think I need to add a little bit of yellow. Just a hair. Now we're adding army painter into the mix. What is this madness? Not gonna need much. There it is. Pulling a little bit more of that tan. And that is a nice blonde color. It'll probably look a little bit better once I add a wash to his hair, because again, hair is one of those things that's really hard to do. Like the highlighting process I was doing on that other boy. Mostly because it's... Once you get to larger miniatures, like when I did Zyle's miniature, for those of you who've seen him, his hair was a little bit bigger and a lot easier and a lot more conducive because it had these large locks. This miniature has more of like small like wisps of hair that I can't really highlight. Maybe I could dry brush it, but it's not going to be super good looking. So I'll just give it a wash and see how that goes. All right, so skin tone. I've got this color called Elven Skin Tone, or Elven Flesh. That's kind of a pale yellow. I'm going to start with that. I'm not sure. I might do a custom mix with something else just to get it to look right. But that's what I'm going to start with. Again, we're going to water this down just because, especially with details on things like faces, we don't want to lose all that detail because we use too thick of a paint. I'd much rather do multiple passes than lose things like an eye or a mouth. I love this music, man. So relaxing. So for this guy, since we did the blue with the other magic, I'm really thinking I want to do some cool fire magic with this guy. Gotcha. All right, so let's pull in some of this leather brown. Start in with some of these straps and belts. Paint's drying out. Oh no. That's what happens when it starts to get warm, as my paint starts drying faster and I need more water. And by paint drying out, I don't mean like in the bottle, I mean on my palette. I use a wet palette, but faster the water evaporates, the faster this paint will dry out. Just happened, man. Sorry, I know you couldn't see that, but there was some details behind the cape that was hard to see. There we go. That's looking okay. Oh, his knees are not clothed. How dare he? So we need some more skin tone down there. How dare he expose his knees? By the way, how's the music level, y'all? I can hear it on my desktop, but I'm not sure how it sounds on stream. Too loud, too low? How is it? Just right? Sweet. So right now I'm just making sure that all of his skin is covered with my skin shade. So I'm gonna set this one aside for just a second and return to our boy here, because it is time to apply the final bit here with the the stone effect here. So let me get my shade out here, and we're just going to generously apply it to this stone. And you can kind of see, like, in real time how it's going from like that gray right there. I just apply a little bit of the shade, and then all of a sudden all those recesses are getting dark and it's starting to look more like stone, because all those places that should be dark are dark, and all those places that should be light are light. And so once that dries, we'll be all set and done. So I think this miniature is pretty good. I think I'm going to be done with it for now. What I'll do, and this will have to be done off stream, so I'm sorry y'all can't see it, but I'll take my airbrush and apply a matte varnish to this to kind of cut down, because you can see wherever I applied that that wash, it's kind of shiny, but then you have some areas that are matte, like on the cape. So I'll go in and hit it with some matte varnish just to bring down that shine and make it look all consistent. But that is one miniature that is done. First stream miniature finished. And we'll get my big brush here, and we'll go ahead and... Oh, that is gloopy. I know y'all can't see it because it's on the other side of the palette, but pulling out some of the paint that I used earlier, some of the gray paint, and it is just dry. It's recoverable, thankfully, because it's just a little bit of water brings it back. But man, we're just going to paint the base here gray, just like we did with the other one. And again, we're still at the very start with this one, so I don't really care if I get paint on his shoes or his feet or anything like that, because I haven't painted his feet yet, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna paint over it anyway. And with a neutral color like gray, there's really not much to fix. Not gonna really take more than one, maybe two coats to cover it and get it consistent, just like the rest of it. with our brush. See, now comes the part of the stream where I feel like I have absolutely nothing to talk about anymore. So y'all give me some ideas. What do you want to hear me talk about? Or you just want me to shut up and paint? All right. And we'll start back on the second coat of this red on the cape here, just to get everything looking nice and consistent. Now, one interesting thing about this cape, if you notice, there's a lot fewer wrinkles in this cape than there was on the other one. And so that's going to be a little bit easier for us to start building up layers. But it also means that those layers that we do build up are going to be a little bit more blended. So we're gonna have to go in and we're gonna have to use a little bit more blending than we did on the other one. The other ones we could afford to kind of get away with not doing that because all of those wrinkles were very small. With this one, I'm really gonna have to be intentional in how I blend my colors. Instead of just going from shade to base coat or base color, midtone. What? Good grief, I can't even talk. To highlight, I'm gonna do base coat. Then I'm going to go base coat mixed with midtone, midtone mixed with highlight, and then highlight. It's really start working up the colors and in making sure that we're nice and smooth and our blend is looking good. So I'm going to take a little bit more black and I'm going to paint this little dagger here that he's got on his side black, the scabbard. Because either I'm going to leave it black or I'm going to paint it metallic. And just like we were talking about with the other one, I prefer to paint metallics over black. All right. Next thing I want to figure out is on this miniature, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but on his little undercloak right here, you have these two little, I'm not sure what they would call it, almost like clasps. If you remember, like on like colonial wear, you had, first let me skip this song because I don't like it. I should probably just remove it. So you have like those pieces of cloth that really didn't do anything, but they looked like at one point they may have been used to close a coat or something like that. There are some of those on both sides of this little skirt here. I just need to figure out what color I want to make them. Because I kind of want them to stand out. So why don't we do this? Let's make them blue. Because why not? It's my miniature. I can do what I want. Even though technically I will never use this miniature because it's going to be used by a friend of mine. We're using the color True Blue by Reaper Paints. I think this blue will be a nice little contrast to the rest of the miniature. Give it a little bit of something to stand out. I know there's two on this side. There it is. Get off there. So I'm imagining this guy's a rich boy, right? So he went to a good college, grew up wealthy. He's now adventuring and figuring out exactly what it means to be in the world for the first time in his life. Almost like a Percy color, except Percy is a little bit different in that he was forced out of his home. Imagining this guy just decided he wanted to go on an adventure with his buddies and maybe ran into some trouble. things didn't really go according to plan, and he ended up losing someone. But that's motivated him to learn more about the magical arts that he learned as a kid. And so he just goes about the world trying to do better and trying to help people the best that he can. Much to his parents' chagrin, who would prefer that he just come home. But he's using his knowledge and power for the good of all of those around him. A little bit of a chaotic good kind of a character. But the actual character who's playing this is a stuck-up jerk. like the first thing he did when he met the drow on our adventuring party was like, oh, one of these guys. This is all in jest, but it was still like, oh, well, that's gonna be that kind of character, huh? Hey, Outrider. Thanks for the follow. And welcome to Mike Paints a Miniature. I don't know. I need a name. Stormer's more boring stream. Amateur Paint Hour. This guy is really giving me like serious Roman vibes. I'm glad I went with the red cape. Like it's this weird cross of having like this Roman style armor and boots with like this red cape and like button up shirt. I'm really digging it. So let's go ahead and start on our second coat of our skin tone. Make sure we get that pretty boy face. And you'll see that I am leaving a lot of this unpainted. The reason is I haven't really decided what I want to do with it yet. It's like his shirt, I'm not sure if I want to leave it white or if I want to paint it like, you know, some sort of contrast or highlight color. Maybe paint it blue since I already put some blue accents on his like cloak. But hopefully once we get to that point where we're gonna need to paint it, I'll figure something out. Just gonna hit these legs again. Awesome. All right, so yeah, that's the color we used. I should probably keep track of what colors I use where, but you know, why do that when you can just wing it? I used to do that a lot when I first started painting. I would forget what colors I used on a certain like blend or custom color. And I'd go back and have to, instead of just knowing what I needed to do, I'd have to go back and recreate the color, and half the time it was like a single shade off. So I ended up like repainting everything. Which is not fun, let me tell you. Let's just go with white for the cloak, or for his shirt. But do I though? That's what do y'all think? Paint it white, maybe some other color. Yeah, I'll just go with white. Pure rainbow. I do want this to look good. But what I am doing right now is I'm not actually going to paint it with pure white. I'm going to use this called Ghost White. It's almost a very bright gray with a little bit of a blue tint to it. Because pure white is very hard to do things like highlighting and stuff like that. So I'm going to base coat this in a slightly darker white and then do all of my edges and highlights in pure white. It would be weird though if like I gave this to the guy who's playing this character and just like hand him a miniature that is just like purposefully bad. Like all the none of the colors match. I use like, instead of like complementary colors, I use like all contrasting colors. So like a lot of bright yellows and in greens and adjacent colors versus actually complementary colors. Just make it look as awful as possible. That'd be hilarious. All right, so now I'm going to start highlighting the cloak. And like I was talking about earlier, because we don't have as many wrinkles on, because if you look at this one, we've got a bunch of like peaks and valleys, and we got away with using colors that really don't blend well together, right? They're not really blending, they're just kind of there. On this miniature, because we do have peaks and valleys, but they're much larger. In this case, we're going to want to slowly build up our colors from darker to lighter. So I don't know if y'all can see this, but this is my base coat, and this is my slightly lighter mid-tone. So I'm just going to blend those together. Grab a little water, blend those together until I feel like they are pretty well blended. And we're not going to see a ton of difference immediately like we did with the other one. It's been significantly more subtle. Just like that. Now, one of the interesting things about this particular miniature is we have what looks to be some sort of trim offset. It's very, very faint. I'm not sure if it was actually a part of the original sculpt. I'm going to treat it as if it wasn't. But it is an interesting aspect of this that kind of threw me for a loop the first time I looked at it. Gonna make sure that we get those edges highlighted. like I've already said a couple times, we're really not looking for photorealism as far as the highlighting goes. We're more looking for what looks good. So we want to take the basics of what we know about how light acts, and we're going to use that to our advantage, but we're not necessarily going to make it photoreal. So for instance, we don't want anything like islands. And what I mean by islands are, if you have highlighted an area of a miniature that is adjacent to another highlighted area, oftentimes what people will do is they will simply paint the high points light and the low points low, and you'll have separation between all of those highlights. But a lot of the time the way light works is you'll end up with bleed, like kind of like I was talking about with my face. You're not going to have one area that is completely separate from another when it comes to highlights. So for instance, on this girl here, or guy, this is male, you see that all of my highlights are connected at the bottom and on several places up top, so that all of these different highlights are connected. If they weren't connected, it would look really weird. It would still work. It would just look a little bit odd. It wouldn't look as good as it does with those highlights being joined together. And that's just because our eyes are used to how light actually works. Okay, cool. So the first highlight pass is done. You can see that, yeah, there's some shade there, but it's not as stark as that other miniature is. Now, one great thing about adding soft layers and taking our time, or thin layers and taking our time, is I can actually go ahead and start up with my mid-tone layer. So we're going to just draw some of this paint away so that we're not getting any of the darker tone in. And I recognize on camera that these two do look very similar, but this paint here is slightly lighter than this paint here, as far as the shade goes. So we're just going to do the same thing we just did, except we're going to make sure that we stay a little bit closer to the peak instead of further down into the valleys. Change that song, because I don't like it. Again, making sure that all of our highlights in our highlighted areas are linked together, because we do not want islands. I learned that from a photographer at my church. There we go. Make sure we get our edges. Now, I'm going to start mixing in some of my highlight color. My highlight color is much, much brighter. It's this fire red. It looks really nice, but I like using it because I can really blend it. Oop, this bottle's clogged. Not good. This one's not. I've got 2 bottles of it. I picked it up at the store, and then I got a one of these triads that I was talking about earlier, where it has like the 3 colors in it. And I got the fire triad, and I didn't realize that I'd already had a bottle of this fire red. But so we're gonna bring these 2 together and make sure that we blend them so that we get a nice mid-tone between the fire red and the abominable gore. Yeah, it looks right. And like always, we're just going to start working all the way up towards the peaks, just so that we're not interfering with the other colors. Now, one thing I did here is there's kind of this lip here. So I'm actually not going to paint the inside of this lip with my highlight colors. I'm going to leave that the way it is, just because I'm not sure that it would actually light up like that. I'm still going to try to avoid having any islands, just like I was talking about earlier, but I'm just not going to link those the same way. Because in this case, I'm imagining my light source is coming from the top. But again, doesn't have to be photorealistic, just has to be cool. I will say probably my favorite thing to paint on miniatures is cloth, because cloth is a lot easier to make look good, to make look dynamic, and I don't know. I just enjoy painting it because it always turns out really, really cool. Again, I need to make sure I keep this on frame. All right, let's transition to our highlight. This is probably going to be a little bit more stark of a contrast than we need, but we can always use a glaze if it doesn't work out. And make sure we get our edges. Not bad. Again, a lot more subtle than our other miniature, but in this case it works really well because it's not as sharp as that other miniature was. Now, let's go ahead and do another pass with our browns, although it's drying up on me, so I need to add a little bit more. All right, cool. And we need color, which is this little leather brown color. Just so that we can start filling up some of these white spaces, getting us all these nice, awesome straps and details done. Am I surprised? The answer there is no. I mean, it's a Souls game. Pretty sure death is the whole point. I honestly have no idea. I've never actually played a Souls game. I need to. Nice, dude. What can man do against reckless death or reckless hate? What you can do is you can hop on a horse, yell a few inspiring words, and plow straight into probably 6,000 Urukai. That would work. But you need to blow the horn first, because the horn is the important part. Might not actually need any metallic paints for this particular miniature. Oh no! My colors, they're blending. Oh well, I'll just wait for it to dry and do it again. And once I'm done, for those of you who are on the Trials of Imagination Discord, I'll post pictures of these. For those of you who aren't, I'll post some on my Discord, which the link is, I think, down below the stream. If it's still there, I don't know. It's been like a year and a half since I did anything on this channel. But I'll post pics there. No, because I never got to the point where I actually set up commands. Hey, what's up, Richard? Thanks for the follow. Just working on this really, really cool miniature from... who did make this? Because it wasn't WizKids. It was a different company. Anyway, it was probably WizKids, but... Alright, so I think I'm now at the point where I want to go ahead and start applying washes. So I'll apply the same wash that I did with the other one from Citadel to like the leather, his cloak, things like that. But for his skin, I'm going to use Army's Quick Shader Strong, which is more of a brown than a black. The Nuln Oil is black. And so this will do really good with his hair and his skin. And give me a little bit better result there. So we'll just take my little palette here because Army Painter isn't cool enough to have pots. Although I've got some extra pots from Games Workshop that I could probably use to put that in because I don't like having to use my my thing here. So I will just apply this dark or strong wash, as it's called, to his hairline. Just gonna make it look a little bit more, I keep using the word dynamic, but it'll make all of the valleys pop and all of the highlights stand out and make it a little bit more natural looking, especially for hair. It works really well. And then we'll switch to non-oil for the rest of it. I wish, y'all ever have a thought that you know you're never going to be able to get out of your brain, but you thought it and now it's there? The first thing I thought was like, this music is so relaxing. It almost reminds me of elevator music. And now all I can see in my mind is like me standing awkwardly with a guy I don't know in the middle of an elevator and this music is playing. But it's so good. Like, I like this music. It's super chill. And I want to keep listening to it. But now all I can think of is awkward elevator. Almost done with that. Cool. Now, very similar to what we did with the other one, I'm going to use a pen wash to highlight some of the details on his face. That's a little much because now he looks like he has an eye patch. But thankfully, wash is really easy to remove. So you take a damp brush and you're just going to tap it a little bit and it wicks it all away. So it just leaves me with that little bit of a wash. We'll start to spread it out a little bit over the entire face. And for those of you who just got here, I typically don't use, or I don't do like eyes and like pupils and stuff like that on miniatures of this size. Mostly because I would like to keep my sanity intact, what little of it still is. But you're talking like idiotic levels of detail on a miniature of this size. Cool. Now we are going to use Vallejo Transparent Orange to color his fire. This is the first time I use this, so I'm going to shake it up a little bit more. Not going to need much, so we'll just take that. Take our big brush here. Just start slapping it on. There we go. All right, just about done. Now we're just going to want to apply that same wash that we did on the other one to the base, and then we'll want to re-black the base, and we'll be done with the miniature. And also very similar to the other one, I'm going to use some off stream because my airbrush isn't in here. I'm going to use some matte varnish through my airbrush on these boys, just to knock down some of the shine that's being left over from the wash. And then of course, like I said, I am also going to be re-blacking the base. So just on this plastic bit versus the sculpted bit, I'm just going to paint it black just to bring back some of that. Just helps make it look finished and looks make a little bit better. All right. Well, that is 2 Magic Boys, very different from one another. We've got this kind of cool guy with like this aqua cloak going on with the blue magic guy. Now we have this like wizard dude. So we got sorcerer and wizard together. These are going to be used practically on the tabletop with a Saturday night or Saturday afternoon group that I have going on here locally. I'm excited for them to see it. I always love it when I can paint a miniature and it turns out really nice, to show it to my players and just see them. I did a gnome for one of my players, and she thought it was the best thing because it's like half the size of a normal miniature. She thought it was the greatest thing ever. And so that's what it's about, right? So like if I can paint something like this and I can see the person who it's intended for actually genuinely loves it, there's nothing better. And then like if I paint something like this boy that I showed earlier and just have it look so cool that even like I'm loving it, right? There's just nothing like it. But that's it for now. I appreciate everybody, appreciate all the new follows from everybody from the Trials of Imagination side of things, from everybody that I've hung out with. I appreciate y'all showing up and following, and hope y'all had fun. I had fun. So with that, I guess I will see you guys next time. Peace out.